I'm Adrian, the cruise and travel guy, and I've just spent 10 nights sailing on one of the world's ultimate bucket list voyages. I cruised on a purpose-built expedition ship and got to explore one of Australia's most isolated and spectacular regions. From horizontal waterfalls to near 2 billion-year-old cliffs, desolate bird colonies and crocodile-infested rivers, this was the trip of a lifetime. So sit back and enjoy as I take you along for the ride. As a region, the Kimberley occupies a land size that is around 3 times that of England, but it only has a permanent population of just over 30,000 people. It's isolated, it's desolate, it's incredibly beautiful, and there's really no better or more comfortable way to access the unforgiving landscape than from an expedition cruise. There are a growing number of cruise lines that sail throughout the Kimberley during the dry season, that is, the Southern Hemisphere winter. Among them are Ponant, Lindblad, True North, Coral Expeditions, and Silversea, who we cruised with. We travelled on one of Silversea's purpose-built expedition ships, Silver Explorer. While the ship's 108-metre length is fairly substantial, her total displacement is only 6,000 tonnes, a mere fraction of the soon-to-be world's largest cruise ship, Icon of the Seas, and her 250,000 tonnes. Many Kimberley cruises sail one way between Darwin and Broome, but the voyage we booked sailed round trip from Darwin, which especially helped with our air travel plans. Our 10-night itinerary would see us depart Darwin and sail first for Wyndham, the one and only port where Silver Explorer would be able to dock alongside a wharf. From there, we sailed to Kulama Bay, Deception Bay, Montgomery Reef, Talbot Bay, Iron Islands, the Hunter River, Ashmore Reef, and finally Swift Bay. A single sea day at the beginning and end of the cruise would offer a much needed day of rest. We flew from Sydney to Darwin the day before the cruise began, and we opted to purchase Virgin Australia's Economy X seating, with its extra legroom helping us deal with the near 8-hour travel day. It was fine, and definitely an improvement over regular economy seating. Silversea Expeditions typically include a pre- and post-cruise hotel stay for all guests. But the cruise line also offers a top-tier door-to-door option that includes transfers, flights, and hotels, taking you from your home and back again for one simple cost. As we hadn't opted for the door-to-door fare, it was on us to make our way over to the Darwin Hilton, which is the hotel that Silversea partnered with for pre- and post-cruise accommodation. In the hotel lobby, Silversea was represented with a temporary hospitality desk, specifically for its cruise passengers. From there, we collected a personalized letter that included information about the hotel, as well as our transfer details for the next day, plus luggage tags. Just a quick note, if you are enjoying this video, I would appreciate if you could hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with the next installment, and giving it a thumbs up will tell YouTube that other people might like it too. Although a standard room had been organised by Silversea, at the check-in desk we were offered an upgrade to an executive room. That would also provide us with access to the executive lounge, plus it meant we could access the room immediately. For just over $100, it was a no-brainer. The hotel is best described as comfortable, but in need of an update. The rooms were spacious, but I think they could use a bit of a refresh. After finishing up some work, we went to the executive lounge for their complimentary cocktail hour and made the most of the free-flowing sparkling wine as we watched 2 other expedition ships depart Darwin's beautiful waterfront on their own Kimberley adventures. It should be of no surprise to regular viewers that I had a sleepless night before the cruise. The excitement was too much to bear, so early the next morning we set off on foot to find Silver Explorer. The waterfront district was about a 10-minute walk from the hotel, and in no time we spotted Explorer's sleek profile behind the port gates. Back at the hotel, we prepared our luggage with the supplied tags and left them outside of our hotel room door as instructed. Not only was that incredibly convenient, it was also nice to see suitcases in a hallway signaling the start of a holiday and not the end of one. The next time we would see them would be on board. Soon enough, it was time to meet our transfer, and we boarded the coach for the 5-minute drive to the terminal. Silver Explorer has a capacity for 144 passengers, and there were only about 120 on board during our sailing, so that meant this was the easiest, breeziest, calmest boarding experience I have ever enjoyed. We had to relinquish our passports at check-in as they would be needed later by customs after our visit to Ashmore Reef. Within minutes, we received our cruise cards and were walking towards the waiting Silver Explorer. Standing next to her, it was immediately clear just how small she is. Silversea prides itself on its ultra-luxury positioning, and that really comes down to the service provided on board, but in this case, it started on shore. White-gloved butlers were on hand to assist guests with their carry-on luggage. We took care of that ourselves, and once on board we were greeted with cool towels and glasses of champagne. Instead of staterooms and cabins, Silversea refers to all of its accommodation as suites, and at a minimum they all provide an ocean view. Out of the 60 regular-sized suites on board, only 8 offer a balcony, and 52 have an ocean view window or portholes. There are also 12 larger suites on board, and each of those do have a balcony. We originally booked an Adventurer suite, but were upgraded to a Vista suite, and while the room size was roughly the same, we ended up squarely midship and with a sizable window instead of 2 smaller portholes. Honestly, I wasn't expecting too much from the cabin. I haven't sailed without a balcony since 2004, so I really didn't know what to expect, but I have to say I was really impressed. The room felt really light and spacious, and everything was spotlessly clean. The ship was renovated in 2018, so everything looked quite up to date and luxurious. There was also more space than I was expecting, and it never felt cramped inside. The bathroom also benefited from a large shower with rainfall showerhead and incredible water pressure that I would later come to appreciate after spending hours in the ship's zodiacs. On that point, what really separates expedition ships from regular cruise ships is how you explore the environment around you. Traditionally smaller and with fewer passengers on board, expedition ships are designed to get you off the beaten path and into places that larger cruise ships just can't get to. And in the case of Silversea, that's done with Zodiacs. They are nimble, air-filled boats that are designed to get passengers as close to the action as possible. Instead of traditional tenders or water shuttles, the Zodiacs really get you into normally inaccessible places, even in shallow waters, and are perfect for exploring the world's greatest natural sights. On board, it really started to become clear that Silversea offers a level of luxury and service that is above other cruise lines and even other premium cruise lines like Celebrity. In our suite, we found a bottle of champagne on ice, a minibar that was restocked as needed, still and sparkling water, and Bulgari amenities. Being an expedition, all passengers received a Silversea branded backpack and insulated water bottle, which kept things both hot and cold. Amazing. Suites were serviced twice daily, and upon returning to our room on the first night, I spotted my sunglasses carefully wrapped in a Silversea branded lens cloth. That was a level of detail I hadn't expected or experienced before. All suites have access to the services of a butler, and apart from serving in-suite breakfast, lunch, and dinner via room service, which is all complimentary by the way, there was a range of other services on offer as well. Our butler would refill our Silversea water bottles with ice-cold water before every expedition. They could also help with unpacking and packing, laundry services, and shoe shining. Our butler was also really proactive as well, and one morning she noticed that it was warm in our room and asked us if we felt it was, and when we said yes, she organized the repair and made sure it was complete, and then kept checking in to make sure we were happy. We also enjoyed checking out the pillow menu, except instead of just reading descriptions, we were presented with a box so we could actually feel the difference between each pillow. As an ultra-luxury cruise line, Silversea has a lot of inclusions, and that extends to tips, Wi-Fi, shore excursions, and top-shelf beverages, including French champagne. Once on board, there's really very little you're expected to pay for, except maybe for laundry and dry cleaning, but there are also a couple of self-service laundries available as well. After boarding and doing a little exploring, which admittedly didn't take too long, we found the Panorama Lounge. Essentially the main bar on board, it would become our nightly haunt, both before and after dinner, plus it's where trivia was held and daily afternoon tea. Of course, we ordered an espresso martini, but there was no handing over of a cruise card or signing of bills. The waiter simply reappeared with the cocktails and set them down on Silversea branded fabric coasters. No saturated paper napkins here. Bar snacks soon followed, and it was becoming obvious that in between excursions off the ship, we were in for something very special and luxurious on board. On an expedition cruise, the expedition team take care of the entire exploration program. In our case, under the direction of expedition leader Lee, they would take care of all of the scheduled tours except one. They're a group of experts, typically with degrees or equivalent levels of life experience, and with backgrounds in everything from geology and history to biology, and of course they're all adept at handling the zodiacs. As I quickly discovered, this was not going to be a typical cruise. Many of the stops were dependent on the weather conditions and the sea conditions, and in the Kimberley in particular, the tides. As a great deal of the plans are in a state of flux, the expedition team hold daily guest briefings and recaps, as well as occasional lectures. Those moments gave everyone an opportunity to learn about the next day's adventures, including timings and tour options, and of course people had the opportunity to ask questions. At briefings, we would find out if we were landing the next day or just cruising, and whether we needed any particular type of footwear. Recaps always followed the briefings, and there one of the guides would talk about the day we had just experienced, highlighting particular wildlife sightings, geological formations, or types of plant and tree life. The get-togethers became our version of nightly entertainment, and I mean that, as there was not very much else on offer in that regard. As someone who identifies as an overplanner, it would take me a few days to get into the groove of not really knowing what was coming next until the nightly briefing, but I really started to enjoy it. Not long after boarding, it was time for our very first briefing in the aptly named Explorer Lounge. There we were formally introduced to the expedition team and expedition leader Lee, and we learned more about the whole itinerary and the incredible tidal changes of up to 14 meters that would dictate our arrival and departure times. It was such an exciting start, and one of the main points that Lee communicated, which I've touched on already, is that we would need to be flexible. We would also have to complete a compulsory Zodiac safety briefing the next day, from which everyone was marked off a list to confirm they had attended. Also on the safety front, and before our departure from Darwin, we had to complete a traditional muster drill. It felt like I went back in time, as all passengers climbed to the top of Explorer's outer decks and lined up in rows to imitate the emergency drill procedure. Silver Explorer only offers 2 main dining venues, 3 if you include your suite in the always available complimentary room service menu. The main and only indoor restaurant is the unimaginatively titled The Restaurant, and it's open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner daily. During breakfast and lunch, a buffet is offered, while at dinner you'll find a sumptuous 5-course a la carte meal, with everything from beef Wellington to caviar. Breakfast and lunch hours would change with the port schedule, so if we had an early expedition on one particular day, then breakfast might be served from as early as 5:30. Not once did I actually go to the restaurant for breakfast. Instead, we ordered room service every day of the cruise, which was beautifully set up by our butler. Lunch was typically held between 12 and 2, with a hearty buffet from which I particularly enjoyed the sushi. Dinner was open seating, and you could arrive at any time between 7 and 9 p.m. There I enjoyed some of the best pastas I've ever had on a cruise, while I also got to give caviar a try for the first time. I can't say I fully understand all of the fuss, perhaps it's a textural thing, but I can't say it was the best thing I've ever eaten. Maybe I need to try again. Dinner always felt quite luxurious, and a wine service was offered with a red or white selection that changed daily. Of course, you could also order cocktails or other drinks to your liking. The majority of the food was cooked well and very tasty, and throughout the cruise, the menu offered cuisines based on different world regions. Guests were also encouraged to speak up if they wanted something in particular, and the chefs would do their best to make you whatever you fancied, and again, that's just a level of service that I've not seen before. Outdoors on Explorer's aft deck, you'll find the grill. This is a more relaxed and casual venue that was open for both lunch and dinner. At lunch, you would find prawn cocktail, burgers, salads, and paninis, while at dinner you could order various meat cuts and seafood. The big draw card for the grill is the hot stone cooking experience, but unfortunately the one night we went, the stones weren't available because of an issue with the oven. The food was tasty, but really paled in comparison to the experience at the restaurant, so although I enjoyed our visit, it was one and done for us. After a late night departure from Darwin, we had one sea day en route to our first stop in Wyndham. Outside, the expedition team took turns hosting wildlife watching sessions, and we managed to spot whales in the distance and even a sea snake. Later in the cruise, on our way to Montgomery Reef, we stationed ourselves on the forward deck and watched the incredible display of what must have been dozens of whales, both in the distance and close by. Unfortunately, capturing photos and videos of their frivolity can be difficult, but we did our best. Of course, an expedition cruise to one of the world's most isolated regions is all about the experiences off the ship, and for all but one of the ports we would be relying on the ship's 14 zodiacs to explore our surrounds. In some cases, those excursions would only be a cruise. In others, they would involve wet landings, where we would have the chance to explore the land on foot. To better organise the excursions and departures, every guest on board was assigned to one of 4 zodiac groups designated by colour. Lists were displayed near reception and near the restaurant, and once Silver Explorer was safely anchored and the zodiacs deployed, Expedition Leader Lee would call each group to the boarding zone. In some of the stops, guests had the choice of a longer or shorter cruise option, and in those cases, passengers that wanted to join the longer exploration were called to the boarding area first, irrespective of their coloured boarding group. Already in our suite when we boarded were 2 life vests. Different to the usual orange blocky vests you would have seen on a cruise ship, these are compact and more comfortable to wear for long periods, but will inflate upon contact with water. For Zodiac cruises without a landing, you could wear whatever shoe you wanted except for thongs or flip-flops, but for wet landings we were encouraged to wear wet landing shoes. In anticipation of this, we had purchased some Keens, or what I soon started calling the Subarus. Not exactly good-looking footwear, but let me tell you, they were awesome. Like a convertible hiking boot, and I highly recommend them. It soon became our practice to slather ourselves in sunscreen, throw on the life vest, then the backpack and hat, and wait for the call to come through the PA system that it was time to head out to the boarding area. I was a little trepidatious about boarding a Zodiac for the first time, but let me tell you that the way that they have organized it is so confidence-inspiring that respectfully, even people of a mature age really had no issues getting into and out of the Zodiacs. You were in constant physical contact with crew or with the expedition leader while getting in and out, using the sailor's grip of wrist-to-wrist contact for as safe an entry or exit as possible. There were definitely moments where the wind and swell would slow things down. In fact, that happened more and more as our cruise progressed. But I always felt safe and comfortable as the crew were incredibly professional and patient. Safety was quite obviously their #1 priority. Exploring by Zodiac was such a treat, if a little uncomfortable for extended periods. Our longest cruise was about 3.5 hours, while others would be closer to 1 or 2, but all of that was communicated in our briefing and in the newsletter called the Daily Chronicles. Of course, you could skip any of the expeditions that you wanted to, but I'm proud to say that we did every single one that was available to us. On board the Zodiacs, the guides enthusiastically piloted us through the amazing landscape, sharing their wealth of knowledge, stories, and facts about everything we were seeing. Not only did we get a chance to see places and things that most of us will only see once in a lifetime, if at all, but we had our own human encyclopedia right there to answer any questions we had. Depending on the Zodiac, there were either 8 or 14 passengers in them, so it was an intimate experience and really gave you a chance to get to know the other people with you. In a separate video, I'll give you a more in-depth review of each stop, while in this video, I'll give you an overview of what it was like, but let me just say that during this cruise, I was in a constant state of absolute amazement and joy. Our very first port of call in Wyndham saw all guests choose between a river cruise or a scenic flight, both included in our cruise fare. We chose the flight. It took us high over the landscape with an unbeatable perspective of what millions of years of tectonic plate activity does to the Earth. We saw the huge Lake Argyll with over 20 times the water volume of Sydney Harbour, and finally, the World Heritage listed Bungle Bungle Ranges. The smooth, bulbous rock structures are a product of natural erosion and weathering, and there was such a sight to behold. It's hard to believe they remained hidden from Western culture until the 1980s, when documentarians spotted them while working in the area. The next day was our first time on the Zodiacs, and we set off to explore the King George River from Coolama Bay. Here we got our first real taste of the famous rust-red rock faces and cliffs that the Kimberley is famous for. Towering up to 80 meters above us, layer upon layer of geological wonder gave us a view into time that had long since passed. We powered on deeper and deeper into the gorge and even spotted a small saltwater crocodile. Where we expected the trip upriver to culminate at the Twin Falls, we were surprised in what became that Silversea Way when we turned the corner to find members of the hotel and service team waiting to serve us champagne. All on our Zodiac toasted to our journey into this spectacularly beautiful place, while Unforgettable by Nat King Cole and Natalie Cole echoed through the gorge. Finally at the falls, those that wanted to got to experience a waterfall dunking. I asked for only half a dunking, and don't ask me how he did it, but our guide made sure I didn't get completely saturated. Our third stop was in Deception Bay, where we got to explore the informally named Gorgeous Gorges. The stunning turquoise waters looked incredibly inviting, but of course hid many dangers, chief among them the saltwater crocs that call this place home. The real treasure of the day though was our fourth stop in the afternoon at Montgomery Reef. During high tide, the reef is completely hidden and appears no different to the ocean around it. But come low tide, everything changes. A submerged sandstone mountain with a huge coral reef sitting atop, Montgomery Reef appears like magic every day, twice a day. Our Zodiac zoomed up a safe channel and timed to perfection. We began sinking beneath the surrounding reef as we watched the ocean drain in a turbulent cascade of whirlpools and waterfalls. Before our eyes, the reef emerged and with it an ecosystem revealed. Birds, turtles and fish were all in the mix as this natural phenomenon took place before our eyes. One of Western Australia's epic sunsets was the perfect end to the perfect day. Another incredible example of the power of the Kimberley's tides was experienced the next day at the Horizontal Waterfalls at Talbot Bay. As the tide rises, the ocean forces itself through the narrows of a 20-meter channel. It becomes a torrent of white water as it squeezes itself through the tiny gap. That much water being forced through that smaller space creates the effect of a horizontal waterfall, something that is just so strange and wonderful to witness and experience in person, and I hope it translates on screen. For safety reasons, Silversea no longer allows its Zodiacs to go through the falls, but we had the chance to experience similar but less ferocious forces at nearby Cyclone Creek. I don't know how well it comes across on screen, but our Zodiac felt like a toy boat as it was pushed side to side by the converging currents and whirlpools. Amazing stuff. At the Hunter River, we explored the mud banks during the early morning low tide. The smell of hydrogen sulfide in the air, a byproduct of the huge mangrove systems here, we spotted at least 5 saltwater or estuarine crocodiles in their natural habitat. Hunting, cruising, watching and waiting. This white-bellied sea eagle made a low pass across one of our companion Zodiacs, and we also got to see the most peculiar amphibious fish called a mud skipper. This is an amazing part of the Kimberley for wildlife spotting and was such a fantastic start to the day. Later, on our second Zodiac excursion of the day, we enjoyed our first wet landing at a nearby beach, where we got to do some exploring on foot. With a little rock scrambling and hiking, we got to see 2 Indigenous art galleries. Guides remained on croc watch, and we were instructed to stay at least 3 meters away from the shore at all times. Well, except for when we couldn't. An awkward crawl and squeeze through a grotto led us to a bit of a comparatively basic area of rock and scrub, but the experience was certainly fun. A third Zodiac cruise of the day saw us back into the Hunter River at high tide, marveling at the remarkable differences from our morning visit. We could cruise down rivers between mangroves that just didn't exist in the morning, and it highlighted just how huge the tidal variations are in the Kimberley. Because of cabotage laws that I won't pretend to understand, Silver Explorer was required to visit Ashmore Reef. Closer in proximity to East Timor than Australia, the reef is home to over 150 species of bird, and the uninhabited islands provide sanctuary for mating and nesting. The chain of islands also plays an important role in Australia's border security, and the Australian Border Force permanently stations a ship there, which admittedly casts an ominous figure on the horizon. While the sea was choppy and we were splashed with ocean spray most of the way, the long cruise into the reef and back was worth it. We got to see something so unique and so special, and admittedly, I kept having visions of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Finally, in Swift Bay, we enjoyed two separate excursions, and both were landings. The first was to the informally named Swirly Rock Beach, where we again enjoyed some climbing and scrambling, and the lovely view of said swirly rocks. On our second excursion, we set off in the afternoon to one of the most stunning galleries to witness a huge number of Indigenous art examples. It was a stunning finale to our exploration on land, and we were encouraged to take our time and walk slowly, observing carefully. There were paintings and markings that you would easily miss if you blinked. The Wandjina style of art in the region apparently dates back as far as 5,000 years and was incredible to see up close. One final bouncy zodiac ride to Silver Explorer wrapped up our time ashore. Returning to the ship was always a delight. It was like one giant juxtaposition. After exploring these isolated areas in the salt and the sun and the spray, to then go back to what was the ultimate luxury. One thing I came to absolutely love was the shower and its water pressure. The only downside was the lack of a shower door, which would see the bathroom near flooded every time we used it. A design flaw if I ever did see one. Silversea is quite a formal cruise line, although on its expedition fleet things are a little bit more casual and they don't have formal nights. During the day, wearing sportswear or resort wear is totally fine, while at night a minimum standard of dress would be smart casual. Shorts are not allowed in any of the public areas after 6 p.m. The cruise line as a whole appeals to a more mature group of people, and speaking to a few of the other guests, we learned that while many were well travelled, only some had previously sailed on an expedition cruise. After our daily excursions, our nights on board would begin with the briefing, at which we must have developed a reputation or something, as the expedition leader began to reserve our usual spot with 2 glasses of champagne. After the briefing and recap, we would then enjoy a cocktail or 2 in the Panorama Lounge with canapes, and head down to the restaurant for a later dinner at around 8. With so few passengers, there were times when we would be the only people in a public space, and that was a bit of an unusual experience. While we did enjoy the musical stylings of a pianist every night, entertainment was otherwise limited to lectures and several rounds of trivia that would coincide with one of the best afternoon teas I have ever experienced on land or at sea. That pastime is very much connected to the Silversea experience, and it was an elegant touch. It was served daily at 4 p.m. Despite the elevated service and high attention to detail, I found the crew really friendly and approachable on the whole. Guests were encouraged to ask for whatever they wanted, and the crew would do their best to make it happen. No was not a word that was used lightly. Even with the exceptional service and luxurious inclusions, there was a simplicity on board that I really did enjoy. There was no fear of missing out like you might experience on large cruise ships, no pushing of sails or drinks packages or specialty dining upgrades, and there were no metal detectors or x-ray machines to contend with when boarding. It really felt like a 6-star experience. On our final day at sea, I signed up for a 9:30 a.m. bridge tour, but unfortunately I was not allowed to take any photos or video. When we returned to our suite, we found our suitcases placed neatly on the bed, and after laughing out loud and trying to not take it too personally, we took the hint and got the packing started. All guests were assigned disembarkation groups with luggage tags to match. We were also gifted a USB stick with key information about the trip and even a voyage overview video that had been filmed during our cruise. We had seen so much during our cruise, and between the long days and the heat, I surprised myself when on that last sea day I realized I was ready for the cruise to end. We woke early to watch our return to Darwin and get one last walk in, all under the cover of darkness. We happened to catch the local pilot coming aboard too. After one final in-suite breakfast, we waited for our disembarkation group to be called and then joined the coach transfer back to the Hilton. When we checked out of our hotel room before the cruise, the hotel manager had actually offered us an upgrade to an executive room for our return stay. And I'm so glad that we took that because it meant that we were able to check right into the room and go straight into it about 6 hours ahead of the check-in time. One of my followers, Jason, reached out and kindly offered to escort us around the sights of Darwin, which culminated in a beachside dinner where we got to bid farewell to Silver Explorer as she sailed into the sunset on her next Kimberley adventure. I don't know that a more perfect end to a cruise exists, except maybe for the espresso martini that was made without ice and served hot. Maybe that's a Darwin special. Direct flights between Sydney and Darwin are limited to Jetstar and Qantas, but I was surprised when I managed to snag a couple of business class reward seats with the Flying Kangaroo, the only downside being a 1:45 a.m. departure from Darwin. Still, it was a comfortable way to conclude what was the trip of a lifetime. Fares on this cruise started at about $20,000 per couple, but taking into account all of the inclusions, we didn't even spend another dollar on board. While that's a significant amount of money, I think for everything that it included, the absolute luxury, and being able to go through one of the most isolated and spectacular parts of the world, it was money well spent. There is no doubt in my mind that a trip to the Kimberley should be at the very top of your bucket list. It is one of the world's most exciting destinations, and I think until very recently has been almost hidden. If you're ready to book a cruise to the Kimberley, you can head to my website, thecruiseandtravelguide.com.au, complete the inquiry form, and we'll get in touch. Thanks so much for watching wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the coming content. And if you haven't done so already, you can also give me a follow on Facebook and Instagram at The Cruise and Travel Guy. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. I'm Adrian, the Cruise and Travel Guy, and I've just spent 10 nights sailing on one of the world's most... I cruised on board a purpose-built expedition ship through Australia's... There are a growing number of expedition cruise lines that sail the Kimberley through the Southern Hemisphere dry season. Nope. To make our way to the hotel, in which case... On an expedition cruise, the expedition team and in our case, under the direction of expedition leader Lee, the entire... Of course, an expedition cruise in one of the world's most isolated regions is all about the experience off the ship, and for that we would be relying on the ship's 14 zodiacs, except for one port. At the Hunter River, we searched the mud banks during the early morning on the... When we had checked out of the hotel,